Okay, so when we look to Asia, we must recognize that I think countries also differ from one another. So we also see a lot of Me Too movements going on in Korea and I think perhaps Japan. Well, Korea is because Korea has this entertainment circle that has been, really going on with the Me Too movement. A lot of female actresses, like those in the US, also stood up and say that they've been harassed before. But there are, other countries who didn't see as much a wave as European countries or the US would do. I think first we must separate China because China is not using YouTube, and that's it's not YouTube, it's Facebook. Because because of that, there's no hashtag movement. So China basically stays out of this atmosphere. Although we do see increased reports of harassment reports as well as women fighting for their rights as well. But it's not going with the trend right now going on in the world. But for other Asian countries, maybe such as India and Thailand, we also see less reports. I think mostly because of the culture. Well, this is just my personal guess, because. The cultural thing is not only in the tradition thing, but also in case of in terms of career. For example, women work less in those countries. And then there isn't quite such a platform for calling out for equality. So in these countries, it's the culture that matters, I think.
Speaking of that culture in this country, we often refer to the culture in Asia or Southeastern Asia as relatively conservative. So recently, there was a Songkran festival took place in Thailand, and Songkran festival is known as prevailing sexual harassment cases. So in order to prevent this kind of sexual harassment cases, the Thai government recently suggests citizens and women attending the festival not to dress too sexy in order to prevent them being sexually harassed. So do you think this is also representation of their relatively conservative culture?
Okay, so, first of all, that's old talk. I think including some cities government right now in China have also used that narrative, and that narrative has been relatively echoing throughout the centuries back then. I think that we should look at conservative. Conservative, the word itself does not mean that it supports women and men inequality. I do not have a clear stand on this issue, but I think that in this case we're talking about conservative as preserving the nation's current cultures and traditions. That sometimes means inequality for women and looking down on women as kind of sexualizing women. In my opinion, that kind of narrative, saying that women should not dress sexy, does not completely stand, but it's not the crux of the problem. Let me explain. So, first of all, it does not completely stand because a lot of the women, when they're harassed, were simply harassed because they're women, because they are this sexualized target of men's want, not because of what they wear. I know that in Kansas University, we have this super famous "What Did You Wear?" exhibition. Yeah, where people put on their clothes, and we see sportswear. We also see clothes of children. These are just harassment started initially just because of men's desire, people's desire, not just because of the clothes that people wear. I don't think that the victim's clothes means anything to the problem. But I mean, if those people wanting to call for equality purely points to the fact that it doesn't matter what people wear. I do not think that holds much water either, because maybe there is a greater possibility of people wearing so-called sexier, maybe less, maybe more sexually appealing clothes, have a higher opportunity to be harassed.
Mm-hmm.
That's because they're in more places like bars. They're in places where testosterone rates come to be bigger in this empirical terms. So if those people calling for equality only points to the fact that it doesn't matter what we wear, then that might be empirically incorrect in some time. So I think the fact that we need to recognize the crux of the problem here is that what we wear is our freedom, while whatever we wear, the act of harassment itself means something wrong. So the fact that maybe somebody wants casual sex does not point to the fact that she or he deserves like to be raped. That's not the logic. The logic is you did something wrong, and then you should get punished for it. So I think the government is doing a really bad thing here by stating that you should not dress in sex clothes, because first, the term sexualized is invented by the harasser, not the victim. And then secondly, I think it's a violation on people's right to choose their clothes, and it's a completely wrong link of cause.
It's interesting that you mentioned that art exhibition in Kansas University.
Okay.
In Bangkok Post report, their first news is in support of the government's claim, and when they report on government suggestion, they said that this art exhibition shows that if women dress too sexy, they will actually have more possibility to be harassed. However, in their second report later, they claim that however a woman dresses, it doesn't affect if they are harassed or not. You can see that there are all kinds of clothes that women dresses when they are being sexually harassed. So there is an inconsistency in these two reports when using exactly the same evidence. So why do you think this happens? Is it because of the do you think?
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just a mistake that the newspaper made in the first report. So what did you wear? The exhibition itself clearly showed the message that it doesn't matter what you wear. But the newspaper cited it as an evidence to show the government's claim otherwise. So that's just like a common, not so common, it's a big mistake made by the press by not knowing what the exhibition said, while just taking it for granted that it supports their claim. It's much like my dad, because I was vegetarian, and once he sent me this post that says vegetarian kills people. Beware, vegetarianism will. And then when I clicked on the post, wanting to find something bad about vegetarianism, it talks about how vegetarianism will make you healthier and all that. And I hope that the press at least got a little bit more professionalism than my dad has. So, we also make that kind of mistake, but it's really a major mistake in any press. You took something very influential and took the wrong message out of it, because that will pose inconsistency in your reports, because you have to be, you'll be forced to admit to your mistakes, or you're risking your whole press career. But then, it will also show that you're just trying to find evidence instead of reporting news, and that's really, really a big boom to the industry.
Speaking of these kind of major mistakes made by even the mainstream media, the word fake news actually appeared a lot in the discussion of journalism in recent days.
Okay.
So do you think nowadays, especially in US or other countries, people tend to have less credibility in mainstream media?
Okay, it's interesting that in US, as far as I know, the newspapers a majority of newspapers do take sides, whether politically or culturally, and those newspapers who claim that they are completely neutral would also report news. They're the fabric of this. They're the there are various kinds of newspapers in the industry. And in China, I think the problem seems a little bit more serious, because we have those so-called free media who try to say bad things about the government, and so-called good media who try to say all the good things about the government. It's not really varied idea sources, because they're all so evidently trying to speak for their side. Then fake news comes in. But I like to point out the fact that I think a newer trend is taking over. The trend of like self-reporting and news, we call like news as a coincidental event. So this means that news can happen anywhere. It may be just here. And when I have their ability to report by writing, the WeChat posts, and also like on my friend circle, or like I can open up this public account and then write about it, then I become the writer itself. And news to people can be a coincidental event that I can report just right after it happened, right after I see it first-handedly. So this kind of trend can like effectively cut the power of those good government-oriented newspapers who report fake news instead of real ones, because we get to say the truth. We get our chance to say the truth as well.
Can I understand what
Okay.
you mean by coincidental event, such as people report what they see on social media, etc.?
Well, yeah, I think that's a part of of how the principle works. So, for example, if a girl get harassed, then one direct thing that she could do is to post it online, and perhaps, although it's not legal, but anyway, so she can post the face of the person that harassed her. So this is a kind of news, but it did not like go on as a chosen path. The news, like the press, no longer acts as the gatekeeper to all the news. It no longer decides what news to go and what news doesn't. Because all news happened as like things of events in the real world. So if it has a gate there by the press, then it's not coincidental anymore. It's chosen. But if it's not kept by anyone and anyone can say anything, then it's not kept, like it's not filtered anymore. It has a lot less filter, and I think that's a trend that's going on. We can also see it in the Me Too hashtag movement,
Yes.
I think. Yeah, so people are all talking about their own incidents, and together they form like a wave that's a social movement that can really change something. That does not happen before, because people before does not have this power and the mechanism to go forward and put this big piece of news on the headlines of major newspapers.
Speaking of the so-called filter that does not exist in social media, as is in mainstream media, this may be one of the advantage in social media, since every kind of news can be heard. But do you think that there is another underlying problem in social media, that there may be fake news in social media, since people can post however they want in social media? For example, in sexual harassment scandals, some people may just want to follow the trend, or people would just simply want to be famous. They may not actually have been through this kind of sexual harassment cases. So, do you think there may be some downside in social media's reporting on news?
Yeah, definitely. I think what you said is really right. One big barrier of the social media is that it also, like mainstream media, bars people from the truth. So in social media, we get to know a person, like the harasser's name, maybe address, maybe even telephone number, enough information for us to scourge this person out and perhaps like blame him to death. But we do not have the exact evidence, and the whole thing has not really been like what we call legitimate. So in discussing social media from my own perspective, I think it should be a starting point. It should never be the end. And I think the end we're trying to meet is actually to put this whole harassment thing into the judicial system, and to make it like have this more importance in the culture, so that people won't be ashamed to tell the police, and the police will take action. So it's never really the end. The social media has a lot of problems in the way as well, and I don't think it should play the role of the execution of justice, but only like the supervisor, and sometimes the alarmer that this problem is happening in our society.